a very small number of children going to Peterborough from here, because the Peterborough schools were in use at that time,
That's right.
And how did they get to school?
Well, when we first moved to town, my children weren't old enough to go to school, and the children that were here rode in a just a plain car. Well, then the next thing they had was a station wagon. And then they outgrew the station wagon. Then it was a school bus.
And who was driving the car? Who was the driver?
Harold Wilson and Rose Wilson.
And Rose Wilson. And then they got a van or a station wagon?
A station wagon. And they didn't want to go into a bus, so then we had to hire them out of town.
And I understand you had quite a few positions in town in office.
Well, school board and town treasurer were my jobs.
And what about you, Lester?
Tax collector and the slip man.
And Bob? I'm sure they had you busy too.
Well, I was on the school board and the supervisor of the checklist.
Oh. I hear too that there was a library at one time in Sharon. Could you tell us about that?
Well, when my folks came, the library was at the Ellen Wilson house. And I guess she was the town librarian. Well, then later, the books were all moved to the schoolhouse. And then we sold the books to the town of Temple for $2.
Well, that was quite a buy for them.
But they moved them, so we didn't have to do anything.
Because most people in Sharon were using the Peterborough Library by that time, I would imagine, with the children being in school there. And that house was the house later lived in by Edith Wilson.
That's
the house that was the library.
That's right.
Another interesting event that happened in Sharon was the midnight voting of 1940, and you were a witness to that, right, Bob?
I was there, yeah. My brother was the youngest voter, and one of the Wilsons was the oldest one.
Oh, what was your brother's name?
Herbert Young.
And how old was he at the time?
21. He was his first year of voting.
And wasn't he also a selectman at that time?
Yes.
Yes, he started very young as a selectman. I guess
My mother was a town clerk at that time. And of course this voting was at night, and my dad made some brackets to hang the lamps up so they could see.
And I think they're still there today. Yes, and the oldest voter was Wilson, right? And I understand that he came in from the fields in his dungarees for the voting. The story is told, and then after that they were photographed, and they were also taken to New York.
That's right.
And I hear that they spoke on radio, and the people here heard them. Well, that must have been quite an exciting event for the town and for them.
Sure was.
And they had a weekend in New York.
Yeah.
And tell me, who was running for office for president at that time? Do you remember? Was that the Wilkie? Was that the Wilkie ran?
Wasn't it Wilkie?
Yes, maybe it was.
And did Sharon vote for the winner?
No.
No, they didn't.
So did they ever have Sharon as the forerunner again of the voting?
No, not that time.
Not that, I can see why. But now, when you were here in the old days, when did the population start to grow in Sharon?
Well, I guess it started
Around the time that you
by
came.
the time we built this house, because there was what? 1, 2, well, 5 houses went in on this street that summer.
Yeah.
Just on this street
Just
alone?
here,
And were you working on the homes that were going in, or were you working mostly on the older homes?
No, I was working on the new ones.
On the new ones as well?
As well as the old ones.
And Lester, where did you work at this time? Did you work with them in the building, or were you in
Not then,
town?
I was working at Bean Simon's.
I see. But you were a builder also. You worked with them for a while when you
I
came
worked the
here?
first 2 years that I was here.
What part of Maine did you come from?
New Sharon, Maine.
Oh, you came from New Sharon, Maine to Sharon, New Hampshire.
And we came from Wilton, Maine.
Ah, from Wilton. Was that close by?
Yes.
Was there much difference, did you notice, in the town of New Sharon and Sharon, New Hampshire?
Oh, a lot different.
Is that a larger place that you
Yes.
came from? So you were practically like pioneers coming here to Sharon at that time. Tell me about your uncle, William Young. How did he start the Art Center here in Sharon?
Well, because he was always interested in painting and art and that stuff, and so he decided to get one here
But where did he come from? Where did he live originally?
in Newtonville.
Is that Massachusetts?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And did he come up here as a full-time resident, or was he a summer
Well, he
resident?
was a summer resident to start with, and then he
Mhm.
moved up permanently,
Oh,
He was a school teacher back then, and then he got into broker business.
uh-huh. Oh, well, that was a wonderful idea, because it was, certainly has been a wonderful asset to Sharon to have the Art Center. We've all enjoyed it all these years. It started in the 40s, didn't it? Or was it
Yes.
50s?
No, in the 40s.
40s.
46, 47 was when they really opened it.
Yeah.
And did you work on the building?
Oh, yes, my dad and I did.
Uh-huh.
We built most of them.
You built most of the
Yeah.
Art Center buildings.
In later years, I did one of the buildings alone, but, yeah.
Wasn't that originally the law house on that site?
That's right.
The people who dated way,
And
way
we
back.
started with the law house and the little barn down back that we had to redo.
Mhm.
And then we built the other bigger building later, and then later on built another one.
Mm. Tell me about some of the other old homes you worked on in Sharon. In fact, the homes you worked on, you figured out about how many homes in Sharon?
Well, between building and working on them, I come up with 43.
43, so it's hard to find a home you haven't worked on in some. I know you worked on our house on
Oh, yeah.
Spring Mill Road for my
Yeah,
mother.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, there's a few.
There's a few you haven't
Most of
worked
them
on.
I've done some little thing, yeah.
And how many
So-
homes did you have here yourself? Because your uncle gave you the land.
Well, my uncle gave me the land for the first one.
And where was that?
That was, well, 123, you could call that, yeah. Then I built another one in the back of that on Temple Road. Then I went over in Jarmany Hill and built another. Then I came back to the one and built another one right down the foot of Temple Road.
But you're staying in this
That's
one.
where I am now.
And of course, you people have been here since 48,
That's
so
right.
you've been settled right here. And I understand that you had something in common with my Uncle Fred, General Pereira.
Well, we used to visit with him once in
Uh-huh.
a while. And he'd tell me about some of the things when he used to fly. And,
Because you flew
Running
too,
in.
didn't you?
well, yeah, a little
Did a
bit.
little flying.
Yeah. And as he would tell me about running the airport at Boston in 1929.
Yes, he used to fly in those little two-seaters. And
Yeah.
Yes, he loved to talk about it.
Oh,
and-
yeah, yeah.
But-
Yeah.
And when you got interested in antique cars, did you work on them from the beginning, or when did this interest start?
Well, the early 70s, 72, really somewhere along in there,
Mm-hmm.
where I really got going. I
It's-
taught out there a lot before.
Uh-huh.
In fact, I had a 1913 Harley Davidson motorcycle. I got that in 59. So, I mean, I was fooling around with some antique stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then what was your first car? Do you remember the first old car?
The first
You
one
were quiet?
that I really dealt was a 1926 station wagon. Depot hat, they called them. then.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you got it
Then-
going?
Oh, yes. Then the next one was a Model T that I got from your mother.
Oh, yes.
It was a saw rig then, and I built it into a
That was
Depot
my
hat.
grandfather's car originally that he used to keep up here in the barn in New Hampshire when it was drivable up here,
Yeah.
when roads
Yeah.
finally became,
Yeah,
car friendly.
sure, yeah. So
Yes.
then I worked on fuel for other people, hats and so forth.
And how many do you have at this time in your stable?
Well, I got, got 3 of them right now.
3? You still have the one of my mother's at my,
Oh, yeah.
and that's in running order.
Yeah, and I have a 27 Buick, then I have this 29 Ford pickup.
I've seen some of your cars on calendars, on the
Oh, yeah.
calendar that's printed up here.
Yeah,
That you show for the,
yeah.
I understand you have some good stories about Maine. Can you think of any of them right now?
Well, I don't know. There's much to tell about. We enjoyed it up there.
Yeah.
Had a lot of fun. We lived right handy to a lake, and I spent a lot of time on the lake making up some kind of a boat and some kind of a way to make it go. Different things. I've always done something like that, I guess.
Mhm. Yes, you were always working with your hands,
Yeah,
and but you
right.
can work mechanically as
Yeah.
well as in carpentry.
Yeah, oh,
And
yeah.
mhm. What about your early years in Maine, Lester? What did you enjoy doing?
Well, I worked on a farm,
Oh, did you grow up on a farm?
yeah,
So you spent most of your time working on the farm.
yeah.
But when you came here, you weren't interested in doing farming
No.
in Sharon. No, I guess it was hard to get a living in farming here at any time, let alone in those days when there was other work available in the building.
Yeah,
You worked in the wood?
yeah, I worked in the wood, but
Mm. After the hurricane, I understand there was quite a bit of work, especially in the sawmills, and most of the pines were blown down at that time, weren't they?
I come up on the hurricane, worked on the hurricane. Can't think of his name now.
Pardon?
Lawton down in Milford.
And did you do any work on that, or were you busy building?
Oh, I had helped repair roofs and stuff like that around in Peterborough and around the
Because there's a
area.
saying that there's a fire in Sharon every year. Well, I'm glad it doesn't happen that often, but of course there have been quite a few, besides the one following the hurricane, and then the one from Temple. Have there been any others that you remember?
Not that we remember.
But what about the one on that house that was the Caliph house, and then I think was it Red Johnson
That's
in it?
right, yeah.
Tell us about that one.
Well, it started with a stove that he had set up and get away from him and set the fire, yeah.
Oh yeah, that was
That's
during the
right.
winter, wasn't it? A
Yes,
cold winter night,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
in talking to Rose Wilson, another old neighbor, she had told me that the children of the Johnson family came running down in their nightgowns and bare feet after
Yeah.
the fire, and sought refuge in their house, and the house
Yeah.
was totally lost, wasn't
Oh,
it?
yes,
And
yeah,
had to be
it was,
completely
that's right.
rebuilt.
Yeah.
And-
Lady is, I built a new one that's there now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
know, we could count on you
Yeah.
for doing that, Bob.
Speaking of Maine, I helped build 3 new houses up there before I come over
You
here.
must have been
That's where
pretty
I got
young when you
started.
left here, so,
Oh, yeah,
when you
yeah.
left there to come
Yeah,
here, so
yeah.
you started very young in the...
I was
in the-
16 when I started building.
And are you still building? You still working at it?
Well, I sort of semi-retired now.
So you're devoting time to your cars and
And
working
cool
on
antique
your
cars,
cars.
yeah.
You know, I'd love to take a look at the one
Yeah.
you have outside. Would you show it to me?
Oh, sure.
Okay, yes. Well, thanks very much. We're going to go out and look at Bob's car. Okay.
1929 Ford, what they call a Model A Ford.
And how did you put it together?
Well, I started with an old tractor I had, and then I picked up the cab in another place, a body in another, and put things all together that way.
Oh, so it's quite a combination
Oh,
of,
yeah.
of both tractor,
Yeah.
29 Ford, and I didn't know they were made like little wagons, that there was a
Yeah,
wagon.
they made them in 28 up through to 31 like this, yeah.
So that's authentic in styling, although you had to put a lot of pieces together
Oh,
to get
yeah,
this.
yeah.
And I noticed the running board, something we don't have today.
Yeah, and these running boards are new. The rest of the stuff is all old that's been repaired.
You just put pieces together of old cars that you find. And,
that's right.
Well, it looks great right now. And how does it run?
Well, not too bad. Pretty good.
How many miles an hour can you do
Oh,
in
we'll
this?
cruise along 40, 45 good.
45, pretty
Yeah.
good, pretty good. And you still use it?
Oh, yes. I go to work with it some and so forth, yeah.
And take it out on Sundays for a Sunday drive?
Sure.
We'll be looking for you on the road in it. By the way, I'm on my way over to Wally and buy Newton's now. And, you know, I've never ridden in an antique car. Would you
Well,
give me a lift?
I certainly will.
Great.
Sure.
The property of Wallace and Violet Newton on Spring Hill Road. Is that Packman Adnock back there that I'm looking at?
Yeah, well, not Pack and North Pack. We don't get Grand Monadnock here. That's up over the hill.
Well, this is a pretty view in your orchard down there, too. And tell me, this wasn't always as calm and peaceful a spot at one time, I understand. What was on this spot in early Sharon? Well,
This has always been the Major Ney farm, even back to 1767, the Major Ney farm. And then it became the Proctor place and the Burr place. And the Burr place, Mr. Burr was a minister from Ruggles Street Church in Boston. And he lived here only a short time while he was having his home built. At that time they called it Keeler's, or we know it as the Shapley place. And but to go back to Proctor, the story is told that this hill that we live on coming up the road, is Buttermilk Hill. But in rereading the history, I think it's incorrect. I think it's actually a hill north of this place, which would be the Upland Farm Road, the old road to Sharon. And I reread it, and it seemed to me that the proper is not the Buttermilk Hill. Other people have told me it is, but it wasn't it.
Why was it named Buttermilk Hill in the first place?
Well, because Proctor lived here, and he had pigs, and he used to go to Peterborough to pick up buttermilk. And one of the bungs came out of the barrels of buttermilk and spilled buttermilk on the hill. But on the whole, this place has taken its name from folks who lived here. It was the Ney place and the Proctor place, and then it was a Burr place for a short time. But most the old timers think of it as Ney Hill.
Oh, so this drop here is Ney Hill.
Right.
Not Buttermilk. And tell us what was on these grounds at one time.
Well, I am told that, of course, this is not the original house. The original house burned, and before that there was a dance hall connected with the old house. This house was built in 1900.
Oh, so it wasn't as quiet a place at that time. They had a lot going on here in Sharon in the old days with taverns and with dance halls. Less quiet than it is today. And I also understand that you've been here for how many years now?
35.
35. And what brought you to this pretty spot in the first place?
Well, I guess the old Worcester tornado. You better tell them about that,
Tell us
Dad.
about that one.
Well, the Worcester tornado was in 1953. And it was the place that I was born and brought up on. I had never lived anywhere else. But when the tornado came, we lost everything except, God willing, the house was saved and the family was in it. Windows were blown in, chimney was blown off. But most of the family was in the house and survived. And to make a long story short, it only lasted a few minutes, and I was laid up for about 10 weeks.
Well, what were you doing when the tornado hit?
Well, it was a poultry farm, and I was feeding the birds, and it was making so much noise that, I thought it was just a thunder shower. And it turned out that it was a tornado. And the building began to lift. There was 3 stories on the end I finished with, and so I got out instead of staying in and landed up against a fence. And but what we wanted to do was, after I recovered, I worked a while for a year in Worcester, but we wanted to go where there were trees, so our natural thought was to New Hampshire.
How were people killed in your area when the tornado hit? How devastating was it?
The total in the Worcester area was given, because we lived in Shrewsbury, the total was given at about 90-odd people.
What about the houses on either side of you? Were they demolished also?
They weren't demolished, but one new home was moved forward on its foundation, and another one lost the whole roof. And,
were there casualties?
Yes, there was some. There was a dairy farm next to me, which a young man that worked there from Canada had only been there a month, and he was killed by a falling beam.
What were you doing while you were in the house with the children when this was going on?
Well, yes, Wallace's mother and the children and I were in the house, and it sounded like a train approaching. And we just gathered together, and it was over in a few minutes, but when we looked out, everything outside was matchsticks. There were no buildings left, and just nothing.